Hey everyone, it's Hayden here. Welcome back to episode 25 of Time the Round. Today I'm joined by Isaac Jessen, the Prince of Precision himself from the Attack Action podcast, a good friend of the show, and a man who's just come off the back of a Nationals top 8, US Nationals, being the only Lexi in a room full of Rune Blades, and in fact the only Lexi in the top 8. So Isaac, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm honored to be here. You guys make top quality content, so thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. Bit of a lack of an elephant in the room actually. No Brendan today, as you'll see. Brendan's been a little bit under the weather, so Isaac thankfully has agreed to join me. Rumor has it though, Isaac, that Brendan just didn't want to join because you talked a lot of smack about him on the Attack Action podcast when he was on this week. So he's a little bit, licking wounds,
Beaten up a little bit. He'll be all right.
Yeah, he'll be right. No, unfortunately, just couldn't be here today. So Isaac, I get to chat to you, and first thing I wanted to ask you is, you got to tell me about the nickname. So I know Taylor, obviously, welcome to the West, the Prince of Precision. Are these self-given nicknames? I got to know. I remember hearing for the first time on the Attack Action podcast the nicknames busted out, and I thought, I don't remember these being organically given. I need to find out about this.
No, the best nicknames are the ones that you make up yourself and force on your community over and over. No, my nickname is given to me by Taylor, who came up with his, and I did not have a nickname as far as I'm aware. And, it was kind of unbalanced. So based on, our 2-hour-long games of Azalea versus Viserai, Crucible meta mid-COVID, he called me the Prince of Precision. Somebody called me Isaac Frost though the other day, which I kind of liked also after the Lexi performance.
That's pretty good. Well, I want to talk about obviously US Nationals and your top 8 and how that came to be. But as always, I think it's great to just hear a bit about how you got into the game. You yourself, Isaac, how long have you been playing? What set did you start playing it? And how did you come across Flesh and Blood?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So last August, right before Crucible came out, we were kind of looking for a new game. Our playgroup is really into board games, the 4 or 5 or 6 of us. And we played Star Wars Destiny for a long time, which was actually a really good game. Had some complaints towards the end there, but that was pretty rewarding. And it's nice to have a good balance of like your cooperative board games where you're just having a blast with your pals, and then the kind of bitterly competitive games in your life.
Yeah.
So I think Taylor, I don't know if it was from Team Covenant or how he found out about Flesh and Blood, but we were just looking for a new game to try. And we tried Legend of the Five Rings and maybe a couple others, but we settled on Flesh and Blood, and it was pretty great right from the get-go. Just like the flexibility of playing the game, you don't brick on your hands so much, or it's like every card does 3 things. It just makes it a very fluid learning process and pretty fun in that regard.
Yeah.
So we cracked some boxes, and then shortly after opened the Crucible boxes, and at that time not a lot of people knew about the game, and there weren't that many content creators. So it was Taylor's idea to start a podcast to kind of, help grow the game. I don't think it needs our help anymore, but that was that time.
Yeah, get out to people out there. And I was going to ask actually, so how long after, you said August last year, you pick up the game, you and Taylor and some friends cracked some boxes, and then how long after that was it that the Attack Action podcast was kind of birthed?
Kind of right away. I think maybe September or October. Taylor had wanted to make a podcast for quite a while, about other games or other topics maybe. So he was already kind of raring to go. And I was working quite a lot then. I don't remember if Taylor was, but then that winter I wasn't so much. And again, it was just quarantine. So having a project like that was, a good creative way to, I don't know, be productive.
Yeah. I don't know if you know this, but Taylor actually pitched me a 10-pin bowling podcast, just for all the viewers out there. And I just turned it down. I said, Taylor, you've got to stop coming with these crazy ideas for podcasts. It just, last week it was, the knuckle bones. This week it's 10-pin bowling. Like, it's just getting out of hand. But, you guys hit on some gold with Flesh and Blood. And one of the cool things, if, for those of our viewers of Time Around or listeners who may not have heard all of the Attack Action podcasts or have only heard some of the more recent episodes, you guys actually started originally like kind of documenting your journey, right? So like kind of the learnings and what was happening as you were starting to get into the game for those first few months prior to, because basically there was no events, right? So it wasn't like you were both talking about, events, or like, I think you sort of had a dozen episodes or so before Road to Nationals even rolled around, right? So you were talking a lot about like the development of the game, how you're both learning it, getting into it, the heroes you were playing, you had a few guests, things like that.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting because there was definitely Session Blood and a few other kind of meta heavy podcasts, but there just wasn't a lot of content out there.
Mhm.
And of course, the game changes quite a bit with the release of each set. And yeah, with the whole world shut down, no competitive play at all. It was just kind of like, well, there's no news, so we need, we'll just talk about like our news
You just
in
make
our
news.
tournaments and stuff. Yeah, and it turned out we did get some feedback like way later on that people who got into the game at the same time and didn't have any news or any meta or like anything kind of enjoyed following us on that journey. So I think we got a bit lucky with the timing that way.
Yeah. I listened to a few of your earlier podcasts, and then I heard the podcast on deck building, which I think is like the first time that we spoke was shortly after that, because I just shouted out to Taylor, I think, and just said, like, this is a great piece of content that you guys have put out. It's really helpful, I think, for a lot of players who are, like you say, entering the game around the same time as you, all have been in the game for a little bit and just don't have this resource. So, I think you guys started to move to some of those podcasts as taking your journey and then turning it into a bit of a how-to, or things that really like a cheat sheet almost, that got you through some of those early sort of pieces. Because the game, like you say, learning it is it can be fluid, but some things aren't intuitive, especially if you haven't played other TCGs before, and then the deck building side in particular can be particularly difficult. You can learn some hard lessons, and if you've got someone like a Sherpa like Isaac or Taylor there to help you through some of that, I think that can be really beneficial. So yeah, I love that episode that you guys did.
Thanks. Yeah, we actually made a deck building episode like 3 or 4 or something, right around when we started, maybe last November. And then after the Monarch release, we made another deck building episode, which is a little bit updated.
Yeah,
because we learned quite a lot since then. But yeah, I think that's also, excuse me. Sorry.
it's okay.
I think that's also a byproduct of like not having a lot of news in the Flesh and Blood world to cover. So you have to kind of create your own content, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and so you've, I guess, it's been over a year for you now with the Attack Action podcast. You celebrated your 1 year anniversary, your first birthday not too long ago. And I wanted to ask a bit about what the Attack Action podcast kind of means for you and Taylor, and like what is the future of that piece for you guys. Obviously, for yourself and Taylor, you've started to play some competitive Flesh and Blood, obviously Road to Nationals season, and then yourself making the top 8 at US Nationals. So is that changing what the Attack Action podcast is? Do you guys have set future plans, or is it about the two of you and your journeys and continuing that piece of podcasting?
I actually don't think it's changed very much at all. I mean, I think our content has got quite a bit better as we've learned more about the game, and as we've participated in metas and become more competitive ourselves. I think our advice and our kind of like content quality density goes up. But our podcast is kind of the same speed, right? Like we try to share kind of strategic things we learn, but we're also not too serious about it. It has been really good for advertising our podcast, because it's like you put out a deck tech video, or you talk about how to deck build or how to test or whatever, and then if you can actually like perform in a tournament setting, it helps kind of back up your advice. I don't think that I think it still would have been good advice had we not performed well, but that just like helps get our name out there. Your guys' shout out, helps us out too, I'm sure. And as far as the future goes, I don't. There's kind of this weird spot we're in where what we do takes quite a lot of time and energy, but we don't like make money at it or whatever.
Mhm.
And I think it would take well, as you and Brendan know, I'm sure, I think it would take a big leap in time investment to kind of take us to the next level where some things start to, you know, pay for themselves a little bit, or, you know, so I guess it's just hard to, dedicate like 15 more hours a week to content creation if we're, one or both of us are already pretty busy in our personal lives. And there's also kind of a barrier. Our buddy Colin's on the team now, who is a huge help, but there's a little bit of a barrier as far as like technical prowess. Because I can like certainly edit a video, but it takes me probably 3 times longer than someone else.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I feel your pain.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, just wanted to say thank you for what you both do, and I know there's a lot of listeners and viewers of Arsenal Pass who also listen to and watch what you and Taylor and now Colin put out with the Attack Action, channel and podcast. So just wanted to say thank you. I wanted to probably dive into a little bit because you're kind of famous for playing so far playing off meta decks. I mean, you just made top 8 at US Nationals with the Ice Lexi deck. 7 Rune Blades, one Isaac, as I like to say, in that top 8. But let's go back a little bit further in terms of the Road to National season and how you kind of got to Orlando. So Road to National season starts, I think that's kind of just before I just met you both. And I know we talked about a particular deck at some point in Road to National season, but how many Road to Nationals did you play and what did you play in those Road to Nationals?
So I went to one a few hours south of me with Taylor and our buddy Mitch, or my brother-in-law actually, Mitch, and I brought Azalea, and I think I went 2-4. But one of my games essentially went to time because my opponent kind of slow played me, so I like just took the Kadachi swing or whatever at the end there. And my last game also went to time, but I was playing a controlled dash, and I don't know if that was really anybody's fault. It was just like,
Big game.
I wasn't quite out of cards. I'd like remembranced Remorseless back and was like hammering away, but it just kind of ran out. So, I learned a lot about tournament play and was kind of like unsatisfied with that result. I had no illusions that like my Azalea build beats Chain and I should win Road to Nats or anything, but it was just like not the best performance. So shortly after that, I don't remember if it was a week or two, but I drove myself up to Portland for Road to Nats and took Azalea, and there it was a while ago now, but I think I went 4-1 or something like that, and top 8'd, which I was much more satisfied with. I beat my buddy on Bravo, unfortunately, but beating Bravo is always really satisfying.
Yeah, good stuff with Azalea.
Yeah, and then I did not get my invite. I played a very talented chain player who had a Road to Nat playmat in the first round of top 8. Whenever you sit down and they have the top 8 playmat, you're like, ah.
Did you by chance buy this off someone or?
Yeah. And then after that, I was like pretty satisfied with that, so I switched to Levia, who I'd played a little bit, but not very much. I think I would have been more productive having stuck with that deck starting with that deck. But I did have quite a few reps, against like Chain and stuff. I just didn't have a Bravo game plan and all that. And then I think I got like 10th or something out of 32 players or something like that at my third Road to Nats. Yeah. Taking a like round 3 loss to a kind of control Bravo. And I just had no game plan, which is just like my poor preparation and, switching decks. But I very much enjoy playing Levia. And I just I'd been playing Azalea for so long and with no real competitive outlet that I kind of felt compelled to like kind of test my metal or perform with Ranger. And then once I'd kind of scratched that itch, I was like, all right, well, Levia actually kind of has what it may take.
Hmm.
So I wanted to give that a go. And Levia, I played Levia in the Las Vegas calling, and then I was going to bring it to nationals up until, I don't know, 9 days before nationals or
Yeah.
whatever the Lightning Briar news really dropped.
Yeah, so nationals. I mean, so I think last time I spoke to both you and Taylor, this would be like maybe 3 weeks before nationals. Taylor had his invite because Taylor won a road to nationals. I think came fourth in another. So he was all set, but couldn't go because of commitments and things like that. But then you decided to go. So how long before nationals did you actually decide to go, and how did you end up qualifying? Was it through XP?
Yeah, I was surprised to have qualified because I didn't grind anything out. I guess I played a pre-release at our local shop as well, but that's kind of it. So that was a surprise. And then I just accepted my invite because I figured I could decide later. And then, leading up to it, it's like I could afford it and I had the time, and you kind of just, regret the things you don't do. So
Yeah.
I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to qualify again, or I'm certainly going to try next year, but it's like I can do this right now and there's no real reason not to, except for, finances, I guess. But so yeah, I think I bought my plane ticket maybe like 10 days beforehand or something. And but yeah, then I was also faced with the whole like I was like, well, I could just side pummels into Levia, but like that doesn't beat, Lightning Briar. It's just like not enough. All my cards block for 3 or 6. Anyway, so I had to decide to go and then like adjust to that, which wasn't so bad though because everybody had to adjust to it. So it maybe even the playing field for me, like in my favor, as opposed to deciding to go last minute and playing players who had like tested for 20 hours a week for 3 months straight.
Yeah.
So I think that was ended up being in my favor, even though I also had to switch last minute.
And so where did the list come from? Like where did, obviously, you've spent a year honing your craft with the bow and arrow. You're a ranger specialist at this point. As we said, you like these heroes. And I think you've talked about this before. The way that you've been drawn to heroes in this game is through like affinity for certain play styles or things you enjoy about them. And obviously Ranger's one. So you had the Ranger experience, but then you moved to Lexi. Like, how does that happen? Where does the list come from? What sort of happens in those 10 days as you decide to change and play Lexi?
Yeah, so I had made, because Ice Lexi is kind of my thematic favorite deck in the new set, but I just threw one together and then played it a couple times right when Tails came out, and it just felt like really linear. It's probably a pretty bad deck, but it kind of felt like it just kind of did one thing and wasn't very adaptive, which was probably just my being very new at it and not creating a flexible enough deck. So then I had like moved off of it. I kind of made Lightning Lexi, but I was mostly not playing really, but playing a bit of Levia, I guess, also. And I think after the Road to Nats and Las Vegas like season, we kind of just stopped playing nearly as much because there's no like, weekly testing or whatever, and it's kind of good to take a little breather. So I realized I couldn't use Levia, and I guess the Wednesday before, we've been having Wednesday morning testing, not really for anything, but so that Wednesday I knew Levia wouldn't work, and I asked Taylor to put the Cheerios Briar deck together, and I played once as Ice Lexi against it, and once with an Azalea deck I had built, because that was still I couldn't
let it go.
I still can't give it up. And I lost the Azalea match, and it wasn't that far off, but it's like Azalea just has consistency issues where, as much as I love it, there's no built-in consistent mechanic. It's like you can draw fire, or you can get a knock or a memorial ground or a red in the ledger or something, but there's also a turn where you'll just fire like a pumped searing shot for 7 and you'll block for 6 or something. And like in the current, ever since, the chain meta, it's like the chain and Briar and stuff, you just have to have a better game plan than that kind of just mid-range efficiency. So, I mean, then I just, in that one game with Ice Lexi, it was not a very good deck either, but it really taught me kind of what I needed to do. Like cards like Winter's Bite gives them a frostbite, so it strips a card on their next turn because they don't want to pitch at all. So having to pitch a card strips one card, and the Winter's Bite effect strips another card. So you're just stripping 2 of their cards essentially for your one card. And there's a lot of cards like this that are just like really effective. And it wasn't that difficult to, I mean, I had a game plan for a lot of other decks, but that deck I brought was not, I mean, since then I've been working on an Ice Lexi deck that's like more effective in general, but that deck I brought was targeting Briar. It's not very good against, a lot of other decks, right? But I figure it's just like Cheerios Briar is by far the best deck. It runs over everything. All I have to do is like win a couple rounds and like perform well in draft. And then I would be up hopefully with only Briars. And honestly, it like makes it a lot easier when you just lay out your cards and have to just build a deck based on theory and take it. It's just a lot easier if I'm only trying to do one thing, it made it really simple.
I appreciate those kinds of builds.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So Blue Winter's Bite. I mean, that card, I was surprised how good that card is. Like since I started playing with that card and constructed, not long after release, that was a card that really surprised me. I'm sure it's a card, just Winter's Bite in general, you said, is a card that did a lot of work. So obviously you put the deck together, a lot of theory, a little bit of testing, what you can get in before you rock in. And then let's talk about the event. So you get to Orlando day one. So it's a draft, first of all. So it's 3 rounds of draft. Three more rounds are constructed, then another draft. Is that right? Or is it 6 rounds are constructed?
No, it's 3 draft, 5 constructed. And the next day it's 3 draft, 5 constructed again.
Yeah, it's a lot of rounds. So first draft pod, How does that go for you?
Great. I was psyched to be drafting. I really, having previously been kind of a limited curmudgeon, I've totally fallen in love with and really love the Tales limited format.
It's great.
And at this big event with a lot of pressure, I mean, I didn't really have much pressure on myself because my expectations were not super high, but it was a lot nicer to just like sit down and play some draft, as opposed to like sitting down with your well-prepared deck and like the pressure's really on and you have to perform. Because in draft, it's a little nerve-wracking because you're not in control of everything, but it's also just like, what are you going to do? You just gotta, I don't know, play it on the fly because that's the nature of it.
Yeah.
So I played a weird like aggro Ice Oldheim deck because that was my seat, but it was a pretty good deck. I went 2-1. And then after that, I think
so 2-1 draft. Then you're heading into the 5 constructed rounds, right? So do you immediately walk into some Briar? Is it your dream, or is it? Do you know how many Briars you played actually in constructed?
Yeah, I played against Lightning Lexi first.
Oh, interesting.
Which you're like, come on, I'm not here for you. Like we shouldn't be fighting each other.
We're on the same side.
That's how it goes. I assumed he was Lightning though, which was a good assumption. Since then, the Ice Lexi mirror is the Wild West. It's a crazy match. So now in hindsight, I'm glad I did not play any Ice Lexi mirrors. But I beat that. I went down 26-40 turn 1 and then won, which is how like most of the games go. So beat Lightning Lexi. I think I may have played a Briar, and then I can't remember the order, but I did play a Bravo, which I lost to, and then played only Briars from then on.
Really?
I did have a Bravo game plan. I just like, I got my first 2 hands were red and I went second, and I did okay the second half of the game, but it was just like too far gone.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was really hoping to not face any dashes or bravos, and fortunately only faced one. But I think, like I said, I think doing well in draft kind of helps propel you up to the Briars, right? Because it just gives you a good a good record by the time you sit down for or Classic Constructed.
Yeah. Yeah. So day one, 8 rounds in total. So what was your record at the end of day one?
6-2.
6-2. And then so head into day two, and it's another draft, right? So tell me about that draft. How does that go?
I was a little more uncomfortable because I was like, I already have a good record, Now I have to do well in draft. Like my constructed game plan is going well, so the draft is a little more uncomfortable. But again, it's like there's nothing to be done. You just gotta play it. I went 3-0. I picked one channel mount heroic, and then a couple lightning cards and a couple Briar cards, and then I just hard pivoted to Lexi because that's what my seat was, and my deck was mean. It was really good. I was the one of 2 Lexis maybe, and I prioritized pumps, and it was just I just won before their game plan started, right? I'd play a control old him, but it's we'd gone through a third of our decks, and I'd won. So yeah, there's no chance to really get your engine going and get your Summerwood Shelter in the graveyard for the recursion or whatever. You're just it's already, which I really, my loss in draft on day one had come from a Lexi player who was kind of in the same position I was, where you're the only one at the table and your deck's really good. So
yeah, I like that you.
I was a little bit inspired by that.
Yeah, I like that you. One of the cool things about draft and you navigating that draft pod is, like you say, you take the Channel Mount Heroic, really powerful card, and there's a big urge to try and commit to that card, right? And you say, a few lightning cards, and then you take some Briar cards, and it looks like it could be on, and then it just dries up, and then all of a sudden it's you're getting put into a Lexi deck, and the awareness to be okay, I've just got to set aside my first pick and probably my fourth and fifth picks, as strong as they are, because the card quality is going to go drastically down here. I'm going to be fighting for these cards. I'm probably going to end up with a pretty average to poor deck, and this Channel Mount Heroic's not going to get me out of it. There's a gas Lexi deck coming around the table here, and if I move into this, my first 5 picks, whatever, I've still got time, right? You get 15 dud picks, right? And if you are going to be wheeling amazing, arrows and pumps and stuff like this, then you don't need all remaining 40 picks. So I think that's a really important thing to take away from draft. And to be honest, one of my favorite things about draft is working out what your seat is and pivoting and knowing when to stay open and when to commit to things.
Yeah, definitely. And as you know, I know you're a huge limited fan. It's turn 1, you just have to block with that Channel Mount Heroic or whatever. It doesn't. It definitely does not hinge on one card.
Yeah,
and I think Lexi's kind of a dangerous pick in draft because she's really, really weak once there's 3 or 4 of them at the table, but really powerful when there's 1 or 2 maybe. But just if you see red Weave Lightning or and red Overflex come around, and there's also this kind of silver lining of playing as Lexi is that you're going to get wheeled blue arrows at the end of every round, whereas Oldheim you have to prioritize picking blues and make sure your ratio is up high enough, whereas with Lexi you just gonna get fed your resource cards at the end. So that's I think that's a pretty big factor, actually. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, you can be focused on taking your Heaven's Claws if you're Lightning, or your Ice Pumps, or your Winter's Bites, or whatever cards you need, and then you just get these resources back around and late picks, and you're my deck's good here. I've got some options late. I've even got some usable blue arrows if I need. If my hand's awkward, so it's I really enjoy drafting Lexi in this format. It's probably the deck I actually enjoy drafting the most, even if it's not necessarily the deck that I always want to be in or think is the strongest. But yeah, it's cool. So 3-hour draft, awesome starts. You're now 9-2 at this point. Is my math bad?
Yep.
No, 9-2. Yeah. And so you basically need to X1, I guess, to top 8 and construct it from there.
Unsure. I wasn't really keeping track at that
You're
point.
just like, I'll just keep playing until they tell me to stop.
Yeah, well, it's like you can't really, or at least for me, it's just like I just have to play each game,
Yeah.
and I didn't really think about like, oh, I actually could top 8 at this point because there's like, I don't know, 450 people there or something. So, if I'm 9-2 and then I drop 2 more games, I could like not top 8.
Yeah.
So it's
Take a game at a
actually
time.
kind of off the table for quite a long time, or like, your odds of top 8ing are pretty low for most of your play time. It's just like the last rounds of the day, that you're like maybe in. But like I said, those. So now I've gone 5-1 in draft, and I'm 9-2, which that's why I think that performing in draft really like helped my kind of linear game plan of just bringing like targeting Briar, because then I was higher up, because I, like other good players had brought, like Oldheim or Ice Lexi, but maybe got like a bit more unlucky in their matchups or hadn't done as well in draft. I don't know what the factors are, but for whatever reason, I was, able just to be at like high enough tables to face like Briars. Yeah.
Yeah. So you end up, I think you go 2-1 in the next 3 rounds, right? Is that right?
I won out until the last round of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just kept playing Briars.
Yeah. And then is it you play against a chain, or what's your last round against?
Yeah. I played against Michael, who was in the finals on chain. And I'd never played that matchup before. And it was quite a bit tougher. And I'm like pretty fried at the end of the day. I don't have the mental stamina for these things. I think that some of the like more practiced pros have, because I'm like, my 8th round of each day, I kind of struggle to like continue to be real sharp and, make all the best decisions. So I'm unsure, but that said, it just might be like a tougher matchup.
Yeah.
He has Husk, he has more blues. Doesn't care about the card strip quite as much because he has the card advantage from banish. There's all these factors.
Yeah.
I think that came down to, I popped my bracers to, I was going to throw an arrow for 7 at him, and he inverted me. And I think he was on 4 life and I was on 2 or something, but it was like my only play. I was losing by that point,
Yeah.
So,
okay.
But that didn't really matter. We were just playing for first or second.
Yeah. So in the end, you come in. Is that right? You come in second seed at the end of.
Yeah. Which I'm 12-3.
Yeah.
Or 13-3. I guess 13-3.
Yeah, and then Roland. So obviously that's kind of you get a break. Now you get to go home. You get to sleep. You get to come back the next morning. How are you feeling? I know we ran into each other the next morning before you went into top 8, which actually, funny enough, first time we met, we were trying to see each other all weekend, but obviously Isaac had a phenomenal weekend and was very busy. So, I got relegated to the sidelines. I was excited. I was like, Isaac, I just want to hang out. He's like, no, I can't. I'm just crushing nationals right now. I'll talk to you later. It wasn't like that at all. So we run into each other in the morning.
I think you were pretty popular as well.
I just wanted to catch up. We finally got to meet, so we chat in the morning. But I asked you how you felt, and you were like pretty calm, right? You're like, I'm just gonna go for a walk. Feeling good. I guess you kind of had the same attitude, right? Of like just a game at a time and just play what's in front of you.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually nervous for the first time that morning because I like made top 8. Right? There was because at the beginning of day 2, you're like 6-2. I mean,
it's
you
big
just lose out. There's like you're not like, oh, I'm in a really strong position. It's like so far to go. But, the third morning having made top 8 and having never really been there before, I'd never played on camera before the end of day 2 and stuff. So I was a bit nervous. But, like you said, it's just like, I don't know, you got to show up and sit down and play. So.
Yeah, no, very good. And so top 8, you run. It's funny. I was talking to Tarek around the top 8, and he said we just practiced against Ice Lexi because they were pretty confident, that they felt good in the mirror match that they had to play in top 8, and then they thought that you're probably going to cruise past the Briar. But I know matchup ends up going, very the variance gods kind of play into it a bit, right? You have some pretty tough beats in that game, unfortunately, and your quarterfinal doesn't go quite as planned.
Yeah. Yeah, there's kind of a lot to unpack there. I mean, I think I played the whole quarterfinal pretty tight.
Yep, I'd agree.
I think I made good decisions up until the last point. I even pitched, like if I had seen my second cycle, it would have been good too, although you never do. Up until the very end, so part of the thing about my deck, and since then I've changed it a bit, but at the time I was running 22 arrows and 28 threats total, which is pretty low actually. But the thing about attacking Briar is that, so if I don't see a threat in my hand, you can still play Winter's Bite, channel Frigid or something like that. All of your non-threats still really hamper them. So that was kind of my thinking, is that I don't want to be I don't have an all arrow hand, because then you have 0 hit effects, or I don't know. I had Command and Conquer, because you can Ice Quake Command and Conquer, and it's really brutal for them.
Yeah.
Things like that. So I just kind of prioritize attacking that specific deck over more efficiency. And in that game, towards the end, I did kind of misplay at the end. But I don't know. So I had a 4-card hand, and I decided not to block, and I decided to play 3 of a kind. So I was like, well, I haven't seen a threat or an arrow. So in the next 3, I'll definitely see an arrow, which is just kind of poor math and poor decision making. Part of my thought process was I had a Weave Ice showing, but I could have hit a Remorseless and a Bolton Shot or something like that, which doesn't proc Weave Ice. So no matter what I drew, I wanted to be able to effectively play out my hand and win the game,
because you've taken the damage, right, to do so.
Yeah. But I should have blocked. I should have played Winter's Bites out before the 3 of a kind. There's all kinds of much smarter plays I should have done, which I think kind of speaks to my little bit of inexperience, or pressure on the spot. I was just nah, it'll be fine. What are the odds of not seeing a threat in 4 cards, or not seeing an arrow in 7? It's pretty low. I'll be fine. And then I wasn't. But
yeah,
it happens. And I learned, there's a few decision points I looked at afterwards, the turn before and the turn after, and things I could have played a little bit differently, and better lines I could have taken, which is a little disappointing, because I said, I was pretty proud of how tight I'd played all tournament, to then be nah, that wasn't really the best way to do that.
Yeah,
when it really mattered. But
it's a sign of I think that's the kind of player you need to be to do well in this game. Though you have to be introspective. You have to look back at those plays, because I think if you just kind of go, I got a bit unlucky, I said at the start, the variance, but you look at that and go, well, actually, these are the 3 densities I had. This is what I could have hit, and it still wouldn't have been what I needed, etc. You look through that, and that's where big learnings come from about, first of all, your deck building, right? So you go back and you start to look at the shell of that deck and what you want to do, but then also the plays at the time, and maybe how you could have played differently in that situation. And further down the track, a similar situation might come up, and you've got these things to come back on where, actually, I've thought about these kinds of lines of play before. I know what I do and do not want to be getting into in terms of situations, and that's how you get better at this game. So, no surprise from me that Isaac, you make top 8 of nationals. Obviously, great one in the weekend. Just wanted to say congratulations again. And obviously, you now have a PTI. So what's a few questions I want to kind of wrap up, time around with today. With your PTI, what's kind of your plan for 2022?
With no tournaments announced yet, I don't know, but I only have 1 PTI, and I'm unsure how much I'll attend or how productive I will be in the future. So I would really like to just save it for Worlds.
Yeah.
That's also kind of meta dependent. If I think that the meta is pretty fun and healthy, I would love to go. If it's the chain meta, I would probably pass. So there's a lot of factors there. But yeah, just to go back, and I kind of always try to believe, right? because if you just say like you got high rolled or you got unlucky, it's like you don't really learn anything, right? Because you like
Agree.
may have gotten high rolled or you may have gotten unlucky, and it may turn out your lines of play were what you should have done, and you do it the same next time. But it's like just like initially dismissing a game as being like, well, they just drew better. Like I think you need to look at it as like, what could I have done better, and then determine, well, I did everything perfect. They just drew better or not.
Yeah.
I think it's like just a little bit more productive
Yeah.
way to look at the game.
Massively
Yeah.
agree. I mean, Flesh and Blood is such a there's so many decisions in a game of Flesh and Blood that almost certainly you didn't play the game perfectly. And
Yeah, totally.
we talk about this a lot in testing, right? Where it's like, what are the takeaways from the game? Because you can go through and you can just be like, oh yeah, this is the result. This deck feels more favored into this, or whatever it might be. But hold up, like let's actually, if we want to get better at this game, and also we want to get better at understanding this matchup, we need to start to look at decision points and lines in those games, and it's something you can even do like in draft, for instance. Like I think it's easier to do in draft. Is you can be drafting, right? And let's use your example, right, Isaac? You get to pick 6, and you decide that yeah, Lexi is really starting to open up here. I'm going to pivot. My other sort of resources of Briar and Earth have dried up. That's a decision point in that draft, right? And it's the same when you play a game of Flesh and Blood, as there is decision points, and you could go one way or the other, and then that's going to lead to more decision points. So there's always going to be something I think you can look back on, whether it be in a draft, for instance, or it be in a game, and say like, based on what I know and what I'm trying to learn, like this is a decision point that was really critical in the game, whether for right or wrong. I just think it's massively important in a game like Flesh and Blood. I don't think you'll get better if you don't sort of look at those sort of things and don't sort of think back on your games, or you will struggle to get better, especially at the fundamentals and decision making in the game.
Yeah, I completely agree. And there's this like really cool, I don't know, like mental phenomenon that happens where, you'll be playing a game and you'll have like, so you have 3 lines in the quiver, right? That you like already take, and you're testing against a friend, and you will just like, you'll want to pick one and be like, all right, these are my options, and I'll pick, and then you'll just kind of like stop and like think about it some more and try to figure it out because you're not on the clock. And then another line will open up. Like maybe maybe you're playing Lexi, and maybe you're like, okay, actually I could take 3 more damage. I have a weird resource count in my hand, but I have 1 extra. So I can just use the floating one to load an arrow, and then I can arsenal, and then I'll have a 6 card hand next turn, or something like that, that like I would not have thought of in my first game playing as Lexi, and then that'll kind of dawn on you, and it's like a really fun, revelation. And then like from now on, that's kind of in the quiver, right? Or,
The play
I
pattern
won't
that
block the surging strike because I only have 2 cards in my hand to block with, and I have to block so like, anyway, it just goes on and on. But just like, I guess like, kind of finding and then packing away for later new lines just because you took the extra little time to like explore it mentally, or like maybe with your play partners, like really rewarding. I really enjoy that part of the game.
Hugely agree. Yeah, there's often so many plays that even if you go back and look at, you probably won't pick them up. And the best way to do that is actually to start to identify these turns in some way, and then be like, okay, like let's just sit here and do it in testing. I remember once in testing during the Road to National season, when we were first sort of working out how to beat like Snag with Chain, me and Brendan played a game where we had an in-game sequence against like a Bravo Fatigue, where we went back and played the in-game sequence like 4 or 5 times. I think we sat there for like 45 minutes just playing the sequence through and being like, like, what if you did this? What if you did that? Like, and just trying to learn some of the, I guess, the key patterns that could come up, and how you could basically use those to your advantage and what they look like. So that, like you say, you pack them away for later, and then that situation comes up, and you know that, okay, this is the most efficient source of damage. I need this card at the end of the game, otherwise I won't be able to push the last point of damage or whatever, like things like that. So there's always that. There's that for every deck, and there's going to be that in every single format, I think, which is honestly like, that's one of the best things about Flesh and Blood. I think that's what makes the game so unique in these decision points. So
yeah, I think that's a really good point, because whatever line you found after that 45 minutes, it's like you may not have realized that in the beginning. So then when you just like reflect back and you're like, no, I think that was the best line, because it like, you're not aware of the new line, right? You like really have to explore it and analyze it to like discover it. If you just kind of are like, nah, I could have done this or this, so I did the right thing. It's just it takes more mental effort to think critically, and it's like pretty easy to just kind of be dismissive or just kind of roll through things. And that's true in everything. So I think that's um, I think that's what makes like you and Brendan really great players, is that you took that time, just on that one particular moment.
I think it's just picking and choosing your times. Like if you use it like you're an explorer, like use an analogy of you're an explorer, you can take paths that are already there, right? And paths that you've created previously that you know about. But sometimes you need to hack a new path, and you need to find out like, actually I can get from point A to point B faster if I make this new path. And those are the things that you're looking for, I think, when you're doing testing, when you're playing games, when you're armories, things like that. So yeah. Good discussion, Isaac. Good discussion. I wanna wrap up time in the round this week with final question. We've got Everfest coming in February. What are you expecting? What do you want from Everfest? What are your hopes? Does it involve any sort of arrows or Azalea support?
Fletcher's gloves or something like that. That's like, break this, fetch an arrow out of your deck, not dominate or anything, just load it, or like load a card face down. It's a 3-power arrow or something would be really nice. There are also a few kind of, I don't know, like design holes in the game. And this isn't a critique. It's like, will be true of any game, but like, like Kano can't pop auras. There's no wizard mechanic to pop a prism aura. And there's just like a few things like that I think that they could round out about the game. Mm-hmm. I would also like to see, like, I really enjoy Ice and Heart of Ice to combat defense reactions, because it always leaves kind of this out for attack and control. I do enjoy those tools. Like, they're definitely counters for Lightning Briar, but just kind of more broad strategies for more characters to be viable, right? Like, it would be nice if, because it feels like Reinar just needs, maybe 2 or 3 kind of specific cards, and then they could attempt to be competitive in a hyper aggressive meta or something like that. So that's kind of what I'm looking for, is like just broadening the archetype, or broadening the ability to combat extreme archetypes with like a little bit more characters, because we're in a very balanced meta that excludes most characters, so I guess that's what I'm looking for, a little bit more, I don't know, tools to get more of them in the game.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, what about you?
You were pretty prepared for that question, so I can tell you've thought about it.
We've talked about it before. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I've talked about mine on the show a few times. There's we had a discussion this week about like equipment, because we did a podcast about equipment, and we talked about what we might see in Everfest from equipment, whether we go back to like that Crucible model of Majestics that have these build around effects. That's something that I'm really excited to see what they do with the Majestics. I'm excited to see what they do with weapons. And the set sounds like we could be getting like higher rarity weapons than we've had in the past. Could we see a legendary weapon? I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily something that I'm looking for. But yeah, there's just a few things I would like to see, some cards that, like you said, that round out some of the heroes. And I don't know if it's necessarily like for me plugging gaps, but it's for giving options to play different play styles, I think. I would love to see some cards, or maybe some pieces of equipment that allow certain heroes or certain classes to play slightly different ways. I would love to see that maybe with Ninja, to make some of the cards like, some of the other combo lines from Crucible maybe more viable. Yeah, that's probably what I'd like to see from the set. And I think we're going to get some really cool stuff, and we're going to, it's almost Christmas, and then we're going to find out. So,
yeah. My favorite example of that is Claws out of Crucible, because there's a whole new archetype with one card.
Yep.
It's really, really great.
Yep, and one that I loved and was fortunate enough to work on that deck, and it's probably been one of my favorite decks so far in Flesh and Blood. So yeah, I'm looking for something like that again in Everfest, hopefully.
How are you feeling about Nationals?
Yeah, starting to get into testing. Been doing a bit of drafts the past couple of weeks, which is good. Nice to get the limited side. It's obviously my favorite side, so I don't mind getting some testing for Tails draft. And now just trying to get into some constructed. There's some data to start with, some things, some hangover from Orlando in terms of some ideas and some things I think we know, and now it's just trying to work out what do I want to play. I mean, there's decks that I want to play that I don't think I'm going to be able to play because I just don't think I can get the matchups right to where I want them, unfortunately. So probably starting to narrow the field in terms of what I might actually play. But there's still time, right? There's still 6 weeks before I probably, I'd say 4 weeks before I need to make a decision on what deck I'm going to play, and then I've got 6 or 7 weeks till actual nationals. So, but it will come around quickly. But no, so far it's it's starting. I wouldn't say it's like we're not flying or anything yet. Yeah.
Well, good luck.
Thank you, and Isaac, thank you for coming on and joining me. No Brendan, but you know what? I think we had some good discussions without Brendan. And next time we'll just do it again by ourselves. So I wanted to say, give you an opportunity to plug the Attack Action podcast and all that you guys do as well before we head off.
Oh, sure. Yeah. We obviously make a podcast called the Attack Action Podcast. We have a sister podcast on YouTube called the Reaction Step. We make some degree of YouTube content. We make 2 episodes a month and 1 episode of the Reaction Step. I actually have an Ice Lexi deck tech coming out in the Wraith Times on pretty soon here, mid-December. That'll be a bit more well-rounded than it's like hard to beat every deck, but it'll be a much more well-rounded deck that can play strongly into quite a few decks than my Cheerios Briar deck. So you can look out for that as well.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Isaac, for joining us. And if you aren't already, make sure you go and listen and subscribe to the Attack Action podcast. Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Thank you.